And hello there, RosterWatch Nation. It's your friendly neighborhood Trashman, and this is the garbage grab. Today is the first fantasy fallout of the season, and it's going into week 2 of the NFL season. So I'm going to be talking about some action items we can um, partake in going into week 2 of the NFL season. So I'm not going to be talking about, Christian McCaffrey feasting or Saquon Barkley. Well, he actually didn't feast, but I'm not going to be talking about the guys who are already owned in 95% of leagues because you can't really do anything about that anyway. So I'm going to be talking about some guys who you can pick up, who you can implement in week 2, or maybe some guys you'll need to drop or make some adjustments for. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, with the Texans at the Chiefs. Texans lost this one 20-34. Duke Johnson has a sprained ankle and is in danger of missing this week and maybe more. David Johnson has already proven to be an immense value in fantasy and now looks to be a three down role for the Texans for the next game or two at least. Will Fuller, who had 8 receptions and 112 yards, was the only Texans pass catcher to have more than 5 targets, though 7 other players had at least 2 of those. 2 targets. Fuller is the only sure thing in the wide receiver core right now for the Texans. It should be noted that Randall Cobb was going against Tyrann Mathieu most of the night, so I would not drop him just yet. On the other side of the ball, Darrell Williams did get 9 touches on the night for 30 yards, but that paled in comparison to the 25 that Clyde Edwards-Helaire had. This is not a committee. It's still worth holding on to Williams just to have a piece of the KC offense, though. So hold on to him. Speaking of KC pieces you can still grab, Demarcus Robinson had 6 targets on the night to match Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, while Mecole Hardman only had 1 target on the night. It is just one game, but Robinson deserves a long look in redrafts and strong consideration in daily formats moving forward. On to the next game, the Seahawks at the Falcons. Seahawks won this one 38-25. With only 20 carries between 5 players, the Seahawks looked like a different team from the last couple of years as they went to the air all throughout the day. Carlos Hyde had 6 carries, 23 yards, and a touchdown. He actually led the Seahawks in rushing, which isn't saying much on the day, but it looks like Pete Carroll wasn't joking when he said Hyde would be heavily involved. He's only a desperation ad against the Patriots this week. Behind DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson was actually the 3rd leading receiver for Seattle, catching 6 balls for 42 yards and a touchdown. Greg Olsen seemed to play ahead of Will Dissly, the fellow tight end there in Seattle, with 4 targets to just 2 for Dissly. So you can leave Dissly on waivers for now. On the other side of the ball, Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones both had 12 targets, but so did Russell Gage, who actually had 9 receptions and 114 yards. Gage should probably be owned going into what should be a shootout with the Cowboys this week. 14 carries seems light, but Todd Gurley came out of week 1 unscathed. The next closest back, Brian Hill, only had 3 carries, so Gurley looks like a steal right now. On to the next game, Browns at Ravens. Browns lost this one 6-38. Kareem Hunt outtouched Nick Chubb 17-11 on Sunday. This was probably in large part due to a negative game script with the Browns trailing, but it shows that the Browns are more than comfortable with Hunt as their primary back. In games where you can expect the Browns to trail, which could be a lot of games this season, expect Hunt to thrive. Odell Beckham had only 22 yards in the day, but he was targeted 10 times. He'll have better days, but he's only going to be as good as his quarterback is, and I don't really like Baker Mayfield. So, on the other side of the ball, Mark Ingram led the Ravens in touches with 10, despite only putting up 29 yards on the day. J.K. Dobbins had only 7 carries on the day, but he had all of the goal line action and scored 2 touchdowns. It was a blowout, so this may not be indicative of either their normal usage. Ingram owners could be in for a long season, though, if he doesn't get any run inside the 5. And Willie Snead has intriguing touchdown upside underneath for Lamar Jackson. That and the fact that he's constantly on the field brings him some interest in deeper formats. I do like Duvernay, better in the slot. I think he's a more explosive player, but it may be a while before he adjusts to the speed of the NFL. On to the next game, the Bears at the Lions. Bears won this one 27-23. David Montgomery's groin injury did not slow him down on Sunday, but Tariq Cohen's 7 carries to his 13 do give me some pause for the rest of his outlook for the season. Anthony Miller was the best receiver on the field in Detroit, making some spectacular catches on the way to leading the Bears in receiving with 4 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. I don't trust Mitch Trubisky yet, but Miller needs to be picked up. His ceiling is high if Trubisky can get the ball to him on a consistent basis. Jimmy Graham only came down with 1 pass on the day, but it was a touchdown. He was second on the team in targets, though, with 7. He's worth starting if you can get that kind of action on a weekly basis. Adrian Peterson, on the other side of the ball, was not the starter for Detroit. That was Kerryon Johnson. But Peterson got hot, and the Lions rolled with him. DeAndre Swift was used on passing downs and scored once, when should have been twice, actually. But Peterson had 17 touches, 114 yards on the day, and did enough to warrant a decently high waiver request this week. It is still a committee in Detroit, though. Danny Amendola led the Lions in receiving with 81 yards, but Quintez Cephas led in targets with 10. Both of these guys could come in handy this week if Kenny Golladay cannot return from his hamstring injury. And then TJ Hawkinson, 5 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown, is still unowned in 25% of leagues, and he shouldn't be. On to the next game, Colts at Jaguars. Colts lost this one 20-27. Nyheim Hines was the big story for the Colts on Sunday, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns. With Marlon Mack looking lost for the season with a torn Achilles, Nyheim Hines is a must-add in all formats. Both he and Jonathan Taylor are going to get a ton of run in Indy, especially if Phillip Rivers continues to target his running backs like he did in Week 1. My favorite wide receiver in last year's draft, Paris Campbell, showed why he was such a viable prospect as he got open with ease as Rivers' favorite target on the day with 9 targets. Well, he was actually tied with T.Y. Hilton, but still. 6 receptions, 71 yards. At worst, he's the number 2 receiver in Indy, and he needs to be owned in all formats. James Robinson, on the other side of the ball, handled almost every carry for the Jags and did an admirable job at it, putting up 90 yards on 17 touches. Owned in less than 60% of leagues, he should be your top running back ad as what looks like the bell cow role in Jacksonville. Well, one of your top ads. You already know that I'm a fan of Laviska Shenault and think he needs to be owned, but Keelan Cole made a case for himself in Week 1 as well, leading the Jags in receiving with 47 yards and a touchdown and targets with 5. He played ahead of Chris Conley. Gardner Minshew only threw the ball 20 times on the day, so I'm not souring on DJ Chark, but Cole deserves to be added if you need another flex option. And on to the next game, the Jets at the Bills. Jets lost this one 17-27. The Jets looked absolutely pathetic against the Bills. Don't let the score fool you. It wasn't close. Maybe Week 1 is the equivalent of the first preseason game for some teams, but the Jets were horrid against the Bills, and that might get even worse against San Francisco this week. Le'Veon Bell left the game with a hamstring injury and isn't an advised start against the 49ers this week if he does play. If not, neither Josh Adams nor Frank Gore makes for anything more than low-ceiling flex this week. Jamison Crowder, 7 receptions, 115 yards, and a touchdown, was the only ray of light for the Jets on Sunday and is still available in a quarter of fantasy leagues. He and Chris Herndon will serve as safety valves for a pressured Darnold this week. On the other side of the ball, well, actually, let's move on to the next game. Packers at Vikings. Packers ran away with this one. Jamal Williams surprised me on Sunday, not by getting 11 touches and a race to kill the clock at the end of the game, but by getting 8 touches in the first half. He's still only a handcuff to Aaron Jones, but he could work his way into flex consideration in deeper leagues if he gets consistent action. Then Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 6 targets, and Alan Lazard, 4 targets, both scored on Sunday, but both players were a distant second and third option to Devontae Adams, who had 17 targets on the day. MVS's floor seems a bit higher, but both are unreliable options as long as Adams is on the field. Dalvin Cook got the touchdowns for Minnesota, but Alexander Mattison outgained him on the day, 80 yards to 50 yards, catching 4 passes for 38 of those yards. Mattison has often been considered a high-value handcuff for Cook and not much more, but the dearth of reliable options at receiver may bring him into weekly flex value sooner than later. On to the next game, Dolphins at Patriots. Dolphins at 11 to Patriots 21. Myles Gaskin actually led the Dolphins in rushing with 40 yards on the ground as part of a 3-headed committee with Jordan Howard and Matt Breida, though Breida was used sparingly at best. Jordan only contributed 7 yards on the ground, but he got the goal in action, so you should probably keep him around. Breida, on the other hand, can be dropped for a hot waiver wire option. Gaskin is actually worth a pickup in deep leagues. The Dolphins will probably be in negative game scripts often, so he could be serviceable in fantasy. Devontae Parker's hamstring injury flared up enough to take him out of the game on Sunday, and he did not return. This injury has been bugging him for some time, so the Dolphins may want to rest him up so he doesn't keep re-aggravating it. Preston Williams needs to be added where you can get him. On the other side of the ball, Sony Michel did start this one, and he did score, but he only gained 37 yards on the day, and he only had 3 more carries than Rex Burkhead, who had 7. The question is whether he'll be able to gain enough on the ground to make him worth the days that Cam Newton vultures him on the goal line. The good news is that the Patriots look like a run-heavy team in the mold of the Ravens, so Michel should get a lot of run. N'Keal Harry and Damiere Byrd started over Julian Edelman in 2 wide sets, and the Patriots only threw the ball 19 times all day. Edelman is still the best option in PPR formats for the Patriots, but Harry's red zone upside makes him a reasonable flex in standard formats. He's going to have to score to be worth rostering in this run-first offense, though. On to the next game, the Eagles at the Washington football team. Eagles lost this one 17-27. Boston Scott left the game with an injury after putting up 51 all-purpose yards against Washington. Corey Clement took over and proceeded to put up 20 yards on 8 touches. 21 yards, actually. We can only hope Sanders can make it to the game in week 2, but I'm not getting my hopes up. In the case he does not, Corey Clement is the presumed starter and can be added as a flex consideration. Clement hasn't gotten much run in a while, but he has been serviceable in the past. Deshaun Jackson and Greg Ward led the Eagles receivers in targets with 7 on Sunday, but it was Jalen Reagor's 55-yard bomb that caught my eye. It was only his 1 catch on the day, but he's going to be electric if Carson Wentz gets time to throw him the ball. If the Eagles' O-line continues to struggle, though, we're going to see a lot of the passing offense go through the tight ends, continue to go through the tight ends like it did on Sunday. Dallas Goedert, 8 receptions, 101 yards, and 1 touchdown, led the Eagles in receiving and needs to be owned in more than the 55% of leagues that he's currently owned in. On the other side of the ball, Peyton Barber outtouched rookie Antonio Gibson 17-11 on Sunday and looked about as underwhelming as we were expecting him to, doing it, picking up only 29 yards on 17 rushing attempts. The bad news is that he got almost all the goal line attempts and scored twice. Gibson looked explosive and his arrow is up, but you can't ignore Barber's usage. He should be owned and flexed with a clothespin firmly clenched around your nose. The Washington passing attack was about what we imagined, except for the heavy dose of Logan Thomas with 8 targets, 4 receptions with 37 yards and a touchdown. It makes sense for Dwayne Haskins to use him as a safety blanket, though. He's worth streaming against the Cardinals this week, a team that struggles to cover tight ends. On to the next game, Chargers at Bengals. Chargers won this one 16-13. It's clear who the second back in LA is at this point, according to the 12 touches for Joshua Kelly and just 2 for Justin Jackson on the day. I suppose there's a chance the Chargers were just easing Jackson in after he injured his hamstring in August, but it doesn't look good for his chances. Kelly is rostered at only 13% of leagues and needs to be added in all of them. He's a standalone value as long as he's a predominant goal line in Los Angeles. Rumors of Mike Williams' demise were exaggerated, it seems. Williams led the Chargers in targets with 9 and receiving with 69 yards, and he didn't seem bothered by his shoulder at all. He'll be up and down all season, but he should feast against the Chiefs this week. Joe Burrow looked like a rookie at the most inopportune times on Sunday, but he gave the Bengals a chance to win and provided enough with his feet to warrant his use in fantasy. He'll face a much worse Browns secondary this week. And then John Ross played as the third receiver in the Bengals offense on Sunday, 5 targets, 2 receptions, 17 yards. And despite having a ho-hum game, he should see plenty of action as the Bengals play a lot of 3-wide sets. He's someone to target in daily leagues due to his considerable upside. On to the next game, the Buccaneers at the Saints. Buccaneers lost this one 23-34. Mike Evans was 1 catch away from being blanked against the Saints. Unfortunately, that catch was a touchdown. Scotty Miller, who was in the week 1 garbage grab, by the way, was 2nd in yards, 76, and targets, 6, to only Chris Godwin for the Bucs. You need to pick him up because Brady loves him, even though Brady kind of sucked in week 1. Ronald Jones played way ahead of Leonard Fournette, 33 snaps to 9 for Fournette in week 1. So did LaShawn McCoy, who had 25 snaps for that matter. I guess this isn't a huge surprise. Fournette just joined the team, and Jones didn't do much to run away with a job. So expect Fournette to get more involved this week. But it doesn't look like Jones is going anywhere anytime soon. The Saints, on the other side of the ball, played pretty conservatively with the leader of the Bucs. And Michael Thomas, 3 receptions, 17 yards, suffered for it. He also suffered from a teammate rolling over his ankle late in the game. Traquan Smith will see an uptick in targets this week if Thomas sits. That conservative game plan that the Saints executed boded well for Latavius Murray, who had led the team in carries with 15 for 48 yards. He could offer standalone value in games where the Saints are expected to win big. And on to the next game, the Cardinals at the 49ers. Cardinals won this one 24-20 against the former Super Bowl champs. Not all defenses will be as good as the 49ers, but it's still a bad sign for Christian Kirk owners that DeAndre Hopkins got 16 targets to Kirk's 5. I wouldn't drop Kirk just yet, but it looks like he could be boomer bust all season, actually. And then Chase Edmonds had 9 touches to Kenyon Drake's 18 and had 45 yards and a touchdown. But he was effective, and he was used in tandem with Drake at times. So he looks like a prime candidate to offer standalone value in fantasy. Make sure he's owned in your league. On the other side of the ball, with 2 of their primary receivers sidelined, the 49ers implemented 3 of their backs to mitigate the loss of those guys. Loss of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. It's not out of the realm of possibilities that Mostert, Coleman, and McKinnon all could offer standalone value as long as Deebo Samuel is out. On to the next game, the Cowboys at the Rams. Cowboys lost this one 17-20. Blake Jarwin is lost for the season to an ACL tear. Rookie Dalton Schultz looks like his immediate replacement, but it was CeeDee Lamb who really benefited from Jarwin's absence. 5 receptions, 59 yards for Lamb. Could have been more. I fully expect Lamb to end up at worst second in targets for Dallas at the end of the season. And I know this is going to burst many a fantasy bubble, but Tony Pollard does not look like a standalone value in fantasy from what I saw in week 1, 4 touches for 32 yards. He's really just a high value handcuff for now, unless, things change. It has only been just 1 week so far. So, I don't want to be too presumptuous, but it doesn't look like he's going to get enough run to flex him, except in the deepest of leagues. On the other side of the ball, Malcolm Brown, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. Another garbage grab, week 1 entry. And Press says the 1B to Cam Akers 1A in Los Angeles. He didn't get the start, but he had the best game and earned more touches moving forward, at least in my opinion. He played well ahead of Darrell Henderson on third downs, and he needs to be owned moving forward. Henderson may have been limited by a hamstring injury, but he looks droppable in 12 and 10 team leagues. And then Van Jefferson may not have technically started as the third receiver for the Rams, but he looked like it, coming down with an impressive timely grab in tight coverage and outgaining Josh Reynolds. If you have a deep bench, Jefferson needs to be on it. And then the Monday night games, Pittsburgh at Giants. Pittsburgh won this one 26-16. Benny Snell ended up being the leader in rushing for the Steelers with 19 rushes, 113 yards after James Conner went out with an ankle injury. If Conner does not play this week, Benny Snell should maybe be the top priority on your waiver list. Deontay Johnson, 10 targets to lead the Steelers, 6 receptions, 57 yards. Juju Smith-Schuster had a bigger game, statistics-wise. But Deontay Johnson, 10 targets. If you're getting double-digit targets, you need to be owned in fantasy. On the other side of the ball, Saquon Barkley didn't do much on the ground at all, only 6 yards. But he did have 6 receptions for 60 yards. And my boy Darius Slayton, just like I said, would lead the Giants in receiving. He's the big play receiver there. 9 targets, 6 receptions, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Sterling Shepard with 6 targets, 6 receptions, 47 yards. Yeah, he's the number 1 receiver for the Giants, of course. And Evan Ingram, 7 targets, but only 2 receptions for 9 yards. And then the next game, the last game on the Monday night slate, the Titans at the Broncos. Titans won this one 16-14. Derrick Henry, 31 rushes, 116 yards. He handled every single rush for the Titans in this game. A.J. Brown and Corey Davis both had 8 targets. Corey Davis actually led the team in receiving, though, 101 yards. It is just one game, but if he's going to get close to double-digit targets, and we know, I mean, he was a number 5 pick coming into the NFL, so we know he has the pedigree, and so maybe this is the year he puts it all together. In any case, he needs us to be a speculative ad in fantasy leagues because he could return dividends for you. Jonnu Smith, my boy, our boy here, a golden son of RosterWatch Nation, 7 targets, 36 yards, and a touchdown, over 11 points in PPR leagues. Make sure he's owned in your fantasy league. On the other side of the ball, Melvin Gordon, 15 rushes, 78 yards, and a touchdown. Philip Lindsay had 7 rushes to Gordon's 15, but he didn't look like the runner that Gordon did. I think he may be a little bit injured, actually. So keep rolling Gordon out there. Royce Freeman, you shouldn't own him in any fantasy league right now. Jerry Jeudy was the de facto number 1 receiver for the Broncos. 8 targets, 4 receptions, 56 yards. But it was Noah Fant who led the Broncos in receiving with 5 receptions for 81 yards and a touchdown. With Cortland Sutton out, with KJ Himmler out, Noah Fant led the team in receiving, and he could continue to do so if those guys hit out this current week. Either way, Fant needs to be owned, as does Jeudy. Anyways, that's it for the fantasy fallout going into week 2. Stay tuned for next Tuesday when I will release the fantasy fallout going into week 3 of the NFL season. And hopefully there'll be more information. And be ready.